During the filming of Dead Poets Society's final scene, when the students stand on their desks, several of the young actors weren't acting anymore. They were actually crying because Robin Williams had just done something off camera that made them understand what the movie was really about. Director Peter Weir kept it in the film, and those real tears became the most powerful moment in the entire movie. It was the last week of filming Dead Poets Society, and they'd saved the most important scene for the end. The scene where the students stand on their desks in defiance of authority, in support of their fired teacher, in declaration that what they'd learned mattered more than the institution's rules. It's the scene that every person who's seen Dead Poets Society remembers. The moment when Todd Anderson, the shy student who could barely speak in class, becomes the first to stand on his desk and say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." In the script, it was powerful, but on paper, it was just words. Director Peter Weir knew that for this scene to work, for it to become the emotional climax the film needed, it had to feel real. The actors couldn't just perform defiance, they had to feel it. The young actors in the film, Ethan Hawke, Robert Sean Leonard, Josh Charles, and the others, had spent months working together. They bonded during filming, developed real friendships, experienced genuine mentorship from Robin Williams, both on and off camera. Robin had taken his role seriously in a way that
Peter Weir set up the shot. The classroom was dressed exactly as it had been throughout filming. The desks were arranged in rows, the students were in their school uniforms. Everything was ready. Robin Williams, as John Keating, would enter the classroom one final time to collect his belongings. The headmaster would be standing there, having just reasserted control, and the students would be sitting at their desks, supposedly cowed into submission. They rehearsed it several times. The blocking was set. Ethan Hawke, playing Todd Anderson, would be the first to stand. Then Robert Sean Leonard as Neil Perry would follow. Then the others, one by one, in a cascade of defiance. The rehearsals were good, professional, technically sound. But Peter Weir could tell something was missing. The actors were hitting their marks, saying their lines, standing at the right moments, but it felt performed. It didn't have the raw, emotional truth the scene needed. So Peter did something unusual. He called a break and pulled Robin aside. "This scene only works if it feels like a real goodbye," Peter said. "Not between characters, but between you and these kids. They need to feel like they're actually losing you."
Robin understood immediately. He'd been thinking the same thing. "Give me 10 minutes with them," Robin said. "Off camera, just me and the kids. Then we'll shoot it for real." Peter agreed. He cleared the set of all non-essential crew. The cameras were ready, but not rolling. The lighting was set, but the monitors were off. It was just Robin Williams and the young actors in that classroom. What happened in those 10 minutes is something the actors have talked about in interviews over the years, though none of them have ever fully disclosed exactly what Robin said. They've kept it private, sacred, a moment between a teacher and his students that belonged only to them. But here's what is known. Robin didn't stay in character as John Keating. He spoke to them as Robin Williams, the person. He talked about what it meant to be young and full of potential. He talked about the teachers who had changed his life when he was their age. He talked about how rare it is to find someone who believes in you before you believe in yourself. He told them that the scene they were about to film wasn't really about a fictional teacher being fired from a fictional school. It was about the moment in everyone's life when you have to choose between what's safe and what's right. Between pleasing authority and honoring the people who've helped you become who you are.
"Some of you will face this choice," Robin told them. "Maybe not in a classroom, but somewhere. And when you do, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that standing up matters, even when it costs you something. Especially when it costs you something." Then Robin did something that surprised everyone. He thanked them. He thanked them for their trust over the months of filming. He thanked them for bringing honesty to their performances. He thanked them for taking the work seriously. He thanked them for reminding him why he became an actor in the first place, to tell stories that matter, to create moments that might help someone somewhere choose life over despair. And then Robin said something that made several of the young actors start crying right there, before the cameras even started rolling. "When this movie comes out," Robin said, "some of you are going to become famous. Some of you are going to have long careers. Some of you might leave acting entirely. But I want you to know that right now, in this room, you're already everything you need to be. You don't need the success or the fame or the validation. You're enough exactly as you are, and I'm honored to have worked with you." Ethan Hawke, who was 19 at the time, later said that moment changed his entire understanding of what acting could be. "Robin wasn't giving us a pep talk to get a good performance," Ethan said in a 2014 interview. "He was giving us a life lesson disguised as a pep talk. He was being Mr. Keating for real, not just playing him." Robert Sean Leonard, who played Neil Perry, described it as the moment I understood the difference between performing emotion and feeling it. When Peter Weir called everyone back to set and said they were ready to film, the atmosphere in that classroom had completely changed. It wasn't a film set anymore. It was a real classroom with real students facing a real goodbye. They started rolling. Robin Williams entered as John Keating, collecting his belongings. The headmaster stood at the front, having reasserted authority. The students sat at their desks, silent. And then Ethan Hawke stood up. But he didn't just stand up the way they'd rehearsed it. He stood up with tears already in his eyes. Real tears. Because he wasn't thinking about his character Todd Anderson anymore. He was thinking about Robin Williams, the person who just told him he was enough, exactly as he was. "Oh, Captain, my Captain," Ethan said, his voice breaking. The tears weren't in the script. The emotion cracking his voice wasn't planned. It was real.
And when Robert Sean Leonard stood up next, he was crying too. Not performing crying, actually crying. Because in that moment, he wasn't saying goodbye to a character. He was honoring what Robin had just given all of them. One by one, the students stood on their desks, and one by one, their emotions were real. Some had tears streaming down their faces. Others had their jaws clenched, trying to hold it together. All of them were experiencing genuine emotion. Robin Williams stood there as John Keating, looking at these young actors on their desks, and the expression on his face wasn't acting either. It was real gratitude, real pride, real love for these kids he'd worked with for months. "Thank you, boys," Robin said, his voice soft. "Thank you." That line was in the script, but the way Robin delivered it, with genuine emotion, with real tears in his own eyes, that wasn't performance. That was Robin Williams saying goodbye to young actors he'd genuinely come to care about. Peter Weir called cut, and the set was silent for a long moment. Nobody moved. The young actors stayed standing on their desks. Robin stood there looking at them. Everyone knew they just captured something extraordinary. "That's the take," Peter said quietly. "We're done." The scene that made it into the final film, the scene that has made millions of people cry, that has inspired countless teachers and students, that has become one of the most iconic moments in cinema history, is that take. The one where the emotions were real. The one where the actors weren't performing. Dead Poets Society was released in June 1989. It became a cultural phenomenon. It grossed over $235 million worldwide. Robin Williams was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor. The film became required viewing in schools across the world. But more importantly, it started saving lives. In the months after the film's release, Robin Williams started receiving letters. Not typical fan mail, but something different. Letters from teachers who said the film had reminded them why they chose education,
Letters from students who said Mr. Keating had given them permission to think differently. Letters from people who said the film had literally saved their lives. One letter came from a high school English teacher in Vermont named Michael Richardson. He wrote that he'd been planning to kill himself. He'd struggled with depression for years, felt like a failure as a teacher, and had decided to end his life. But before he did, he'd watched Dead Poets Society one last time. The scene where the students stand on their desks destroyed me, Michael wrote. I realized that I'd had students like that, kids whose lives I'd touched without knowing.
The young actors from Dead Poets Society maintained their connection to Robin over the years. They'd reunite occasionally, stay in touch, check in on each other. And they'd all talk about that final scene, about what Robin had said to them off camera, about how it had shaped not just their performances, but their lives. Ethan Hawke became one of his generation's most respected actors. He's talked frequently in interviews about how Robin Williams taught him that acting isn't about pretending, it's about accessing truth. Robin showed me that the best performances happen when you stop performing, Ethan said, when you just let yourself feel what you're actually feeling. The final scene in Dead Poets Society worked because we weren't acting. We were actually saying goodbye to someone who'd mentored us. Robin made sure of that. Robert Sean Leonard had a long career in both film and theater. He said that he judges every acting job by whether it lives up to the standard Robin set on Dead Poets Society. Robin taught us that this work matters, Robert said, not because it makes us famous or successful, but because it can actually help people. That final scene has meant something to people all over the world. That's because Robin refused to let it be fake. When Dead Poets Society celebrated its 25th anniversary in 2014, just months before Robin's death, the cast reunited for a special screening and discussion. They showed the final scene, the one where the students stand on their desks, and then they talked about filming it. Ethan Hawke told the audience what Robin had said to them off camera that day, about being enough, exactly as you are, about choosing what's right over what's safe, about standing up for the people who believed in you.
Robin gave us that speech knowing we'd carry it for the rest of our lives, Ethan said. And we have. Every single one of us has faced moments where we had to choose between safety and integrity. And in those moments, I hear Robin's voice telling us to stand on the desk. The audience gave a standing ovation, not for the actors, but for Robin Williams, who wasn't there to receive it. 3 months later, Robin Williams died. The tributes poured in from around the world. But some of the most moving came from teachers who'd been inspired by Dead Poets Society. They shared stories of students they'd helped because Mr. Keating had shown them how. They talked about lessons they'd taught because the film had given them courage. They described moments when they'd stood up to administration because John Keating had modeled what that looked like. Michael Richardson, the Vermont teacher who'd written to Robin years earlier about being saved from suicide, wrote a public tribute. Robin Williams gave me 2 gifts, Michael wrote. The first was a reason to live when I decided to die. The second was a model for how to teach with passion and purpose. I've been teaching for 25 more years because of Dead Poets Society. I've touched hundreds of students' lives. All of that exists because Robin Williams cared enough to make that film matter. The final scene of Dead Poets Society, students standing on desks, tears in their eyes, defying authority to honor their teacher, wasn't just great filmmaking. It was a perfect example of Robin Williams' philosophy about art and life.
Make it real. Make it matter. Don't just perform emotion. Feel it. Don't just tell stories. Use them to help people. That's what Robin did in that 10-minute conversation off camera. He turned a scripted scene into a real moment. He made sure the actors weren't just hitting marks, but experiencing genuine emotion. He ensured that when audiences watched that scene, they'd be seeing something true. And it worked. For 35 years, people have watched that final scene and cried. Not because the actors are good at pretending to cry, but because they were actually crying. Not because the scene is well written, but because it captured a real goodbye between a mentor and his students.
Robin Williams taught those young actors that standing up matters, that honoring the people who believed in you matters, that choosing integrity over safety matters. And then he made sure they felt it deeply enough that when the cameras rolled, their performance wasn't a performance at all. It was just truth, captured on film, preserved forever. That's the real story of Dead Poets Society's final scene. Not a story about good acting or clever directing, but a story about a teacher, Robin Williams, who knew that the only way to make something meaningful was to make it real.
He gave those young actors a gift off camera. He made them feel valued, seen, and enough. And when they stood on those desks, they weren't acting. They were honoring someone who genuinely changed them. Just like Mr. Keating did for his students. Just like Robin Williams did for everyone who ever watched that film and decided to stand up, speak out, or simply choose to keep living. The tears in that final scene were real. The emotion was real. The impact was real. And 35 years later, people are still standing on desks because Robin Williams refused to let that moment be anything less than true. Oh, Captain, my captain. Thank you, Robin. Thank you for making it real.